Welcome to Gold Diggers, Winning in Sports Business, episode number 2. And on this week's potty, Unearthing Success, Sustainability in the Sporting World. Stephen McIvor with Mike Keech from ImpactSponsorship.com. So Mike, don't say hello, listeners, because we're not in 1954 Radio Land, so I'm going to stop you right there before you even get going. When you think when you think about sustainability and the sustainability in the sporting world, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I think it's impact. It is. It's the impact that sport has on the world, stadiums, climate, and it's time for change.
Yeah, why is it so important, though? I mean, you've probably given me part of the reason there already.
Yeah, it's karma. The climate's changing. It's affecting our youth, and it's time for change.
So Mother Earth's pissed off, basically, right?
Yeah, there's a bit of karma at play right now.
Yeah, all right. Well, I think we need to get into the real world and people that are involved and have a passion for sustainability. Our guest on Gold Diggers, Winning in Sports Business and Sustainability in this episode is Glenn Ashby, multiple America's Cup winning, and I said winning, champion, fastest man on the planet in a land yacht, broke the record in 2023 in this amazing yacht called Hotanuka of 225 kilometres an hour, but is also passionate about sustainability in the marine industry. And he joins us now. Hey, Glenn, thanks for joining us on Gold Diggers, Winning in Sports Business. Can you tell us why you are so passionate about sustainability in the marine industry?
Yeah, g'day, gents. Look, I guess, growing up sailing, being on the water and sort of being on lakes and experiencing sort of oceans and big rivers and things like that, and largely being on the water, I think, looking at a lot of, talking about sort of the boating industry, I guess, from my set of goggles, if you like, I think, looking out the window of a yacht and seeing sort of, big power boats and ships and ferries, ploughing through the water, sort of pushing a whole lot of the ocean out of the way very inefficiently, burning a whole lot of fuel and not going very fast, is sort of, been something that I've seen that movie many, many times. So I think, as a marine industry, as we sort of move forwards into this whole new era of technology, it really feels important to me, and has done for quite a long time, that, we need to embrace the new sort of technology and embrace how we move forwards, in the boating sector. And I think, shipping largely around the world is a huge polluter, in a global sense. I mean, a lot of industries are not ideal. So for me personally, I sort of feel really quite passionate about, how do we, walk the walk and not just talk the talk, and actually make a difference to the future of boating. So I think, as we move forward, it's really important to be cleaner and actually think smarter.
So in saying that, what is your answer? What's your short-term answer, and what are you doing about it to make the marine industry stand up and take notice?
Yeah, look, I think efficiency is probably the key word in the boating industry, I think, as we go forwards. And I think there's, engine technology has got a lot better over the years, but, we're still, got a long way to go there. But I think probably one of the biggest things in the boating industry is, water is really 1,000 times denser than air. So an aircraft is relatively efficient at high speed going through air, versus a boat, pushing a whole lot of water out the way to actually move forward. So one thing which we have seen, in the past sort of decade, really, with inside the America's Cup world and other classes, has been that introduction of foiling and actually, lifting the hulls, out of the water. And the reason we're seeing such sort of high speeds with the, basically the same engine, the same sail area as what the boats were in the past, is just the fact that we're actually lifting the hull up out of the water and reducing a huge amount of wetted surface area and friction drag. And literally the whole boats are up on very small foils now. And those foils are very, very efficient, sort of in between about 20 knots and about sort of 45 to 50 knots. So that sort of pre-cavitation speed of around 50 knots. So the vast amount of the boating industry, ferries, pleasure boats, sailing boats, they're sort of between that sort of 20 and 50 knot barrier. So foiling really, really lends itself to that sector of the marine industry. And, for sort of shipping purposes and that sort of thing, it's very difficult to get something super, super big and super heavy to foil. But a lot of the smaller boats, the pilots' boats, for example, that go out and meet the ships, they're a perfect candidate for that sort of foiling technology, which, in turn, reduces the emissions by, or energy usage by, more than 50%. Can even be only usage of 25% of the energy usage for the same performance. So huge gains to be had there worldwide.
In dollar terms, when you talk about a foiling pilot boat, right? This is because they're everywhere and there are ports everywhere. In dollar terms, how much do you think port authorities would be saving and lessening their carbon footprint?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a huge, globally, it's a huge saving worldwide. Obviously, there's an upfront cost of the purchase of the boat, but it really is not that long. It's only a few years before that boat's well and truly paying for itself well into the future, and the life cycle of those boats should be, 20 to 30 years. So it really is it's a real shift in a mindset, and it's a real shift, in technology, and with sort of autopilot flight technology now, similar to what aircrafts use to fly stably. That's actually, well and truly immersed in foiling yacht racing now. That's been developed over the last sort of decade as well. And you see the AC-40, America's Cup class AC-40s that have been sailing around in the last two AC World Series events, and they're actually completely sailed off an autopilot. The crew aren't actually, flying the boat manually. It's all done by autopilot. So a lot of the testing gets done on autopilot on the race shots, and with the America's Cup 75 class coming out soon, they will be flown manually, but that's part of the rules. But all the technology is there to literally be sitting down on a cruising catamaran or a cruising monohull, be foiling down the harbour, having a gin and tonic, and sitting there with your mates, not spilling a drop. So it's we have to embrace it.
Oh, well, I know we can all embrace having a GNT on the water. That sounds sweet. I want to just whip back to the marine industry, because generation of power in these pilot boats, and maybe going forward for tankers and things like that. Are we going down the hydrogen path or hydrogen electric path?
There's definitely a lot of work going on in that sector at the moment, and there's a lot of work going into that, to really make some big gains in the future for super tankers and for bigger sort of heavier ships that carry cargo. So there's also some sail technology being reintroduced, and you have to remember in the very early days how ships actually got goods around the world was by sail, and yacht development and hull development was largely driven commercially by trying to get goods across the world quicker than your competitors. So that really, really pushed, development of sailing vessels and ships in the early days. And as obviously the steam engines came in and diesel and other types of engines, the sails sort of went by the wayside, and they started burning fossil fuels to get from point A to point B in the quest of getting their goods there quicker. But as we've moved forward, there's actually, been a resurgence in how can we do this better? How can we make savings? And some of the shipping industry now is actually looking into, the use of sail-assisted vessels now in the future, which can vastly reduce, the fuel burn across the world. And that technology is like drone technology now, is all done by computer, and you can actually orchestrate how automatic all the sails can be, how they can be raised and lowered. There's a whole host of really wonderful projects going on at the moment that's very exciting in the industry.
I suppose, to your point, the perfect example of sail design and changing the narrative, you look at Jeff Bezos, the Amazon billionaire, and his super yacht Koru. He's actually called it Koru, with those monster sails on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some things that sort of seem absolutely impossible in the marine industry. A few years down the track, become the norm, and it's incredible how quickly things are changing. But we really do need to embrace, what we are looking forward to into the future, and as Mike was saying previously, make sure we have an impact on what we do in the future, because if we don't, we're in big trouble, and we might be in big trouble already. So we really need to take this on and not just sort of think about it. We've actually got to do something about it.
Glenn, what about hull design?
Yeah, look, hull design is another really big area of development as well. And as construction and materials become more and more technologically advanced, the modelling, the CFD, the computer fluid dynamics, software and computing power becomes greater and greater. Hull design in shipping, commercial shipping, ferries, personal pleasure boats, cruising boats, for example, will all get more and more efficient, and really the embracement, if you like, of hull design in the future. Whilst some boats will be foiling, not all boats will be. So that further advancement of hull technology and really studying what is more efficient, what's the best way of doing things in actual sort of energy usage or fuel burn terms, or however you're powering the vessel. If you can be more efficient through water, you make huge gains in power savings. And to do 1 or 2 knots faster, for example, in a commercial ship may actually end up using nearly double the amount of fuel, because it's just such a big drag process to push a hull through the water just a little bit faster. So, the more efficient the hull, the less fuel you use, and the more money that people save, and the better it is for the environment. So it's a win-win in all cases in the future, and you've just got to be smart about how you implement it.
Glenn, when you're looking at projects and you're going to business and saying, I want you to pay the bills, and you mentioned the word sustainability, and you mentioned the word Mother Earth and the power of the wind. Did their eyes light up nowadays more so than maybe before?
I think that the buy-in these days is way more than it was probably 5 or 10 years ago. I think 10 years ago, you were quite comfortable bolting 400 horsepower outboards on the back of your cruising boat and heading off down the harbour. Whereas I think these days it's much more about how do we do this better, and how do we get the same performance out of something that's just much more efficient. And I think that's well and truly in the industry, and I think in worldwide now, particularly in Europe and America, I think is embraced much more than it is, I think, in New Zealand and Australia. So I think the West Island over here in Australia, and I think New Zealand, I think we are dragging the chain a little bit, and I think we actually need to sort of really have a good look at ourselves and make sure that we actually think to the future and not just in the present.
Yeah, Glenn, I mean, there's good points, right, between Northern and Southern Hemisphere, but going back to that point about the time now versus 5 or 10 years ago, what do you think's been the change?
Yeah, look, I think largely the technology in the computer fluid dynamic side of things and foiling technology, I think for a lot of boating, I think we're very, very much at the infancy of what boating can be in the future. And I think, we've seen sort of foiling boats, and we're starting to see, commercial boats starting to lift off out of the water and be much more efficient. And as the autopilot and that flight technology has got better and better, everyone's got a lot more comfortable with actually lifting out and cruising across above the waves rather than through them. And I think that's probably been the biggest change, Mike, is really that embracement of foiling technology. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, I think we'll see a huge influx of foiling technology, not only in the sort of the smaller boat industry, but also bigger ferries. And as the knowledge has got a lot better, and the understanding of a lot of the section shapes needed, and as materials have got better too, the whole process has just got it's all married up and gone hand in hand. So I really think we're going to see a lot of boats sort of literally flying across the water, be it sail or power, over the next decade.
Yeah, I suppose there's somewhat of an irony when you talk about the foiling technology on maybe mid-sized shipping. But the irony for me is that oil's not going away, right? So I can't see super tankers falling. But are we coming down to how their propulsion is to try and lessen that footprint?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's where that you mentioned the hydrogen technology. There's other sort of battery sources that are potentially coming online over the next sort of year or so. Largely pushed by the aviation industry and the motoring industry, which all filter down and filter across into the marine industry, and that sort of filters back into the aviation industry as well. And I think there's certainly lots of different ways that that we're going to get around the world in the future. And I know, firsthand that there's, larger aircraft that are in test at the moment that are battery powered and, burning no fuel at all to go quite a big distance. And obviously being powered by the wind for the vast majority of my life, across the water, I think the technology there, not only in just the actual flight control, but also, sail control and all that sort of thing in the future, there'll be very much a sort of a hands-free sailing, for the future, not just for pleasure sailing, but also for potentially for transport vessels that are, potentially autonomous that could be, sailing or, literally flying around the world, with, payload of whatever. So there's certainly some really exciting options in the future. And I think, that really the modelling of things, 5 or 10 years ago, what we're modelling now would have taken, probably, 6 months to do. And then what we're doing now in really a day or two is that advancement in computing power. And that I think ultimately is actually, and obviously AI, feeding into that, the opportunity for gain there is really quite intense. And I think that's where hopefully that, we can make it as a marine sector, we can pull our weight and make a really big difference to things going forward for Mother Earth.
Mate, that actually excites me, Glenn, because
he's not easily excited, okay?
And I'm telling you, I'm not a bit of an Elliot Goblet, really, but but mate, I was going to say to you, I think the thing that excites me as a global local that what you're talking about actually makes sense, and I've got a little bit of a selfishness here. Does that mean that we could actually have a foiling transport on water between, say, Meadow and the city? Is there hope? Is there a future for new transport?
Absolutely, 100%, and it's we'd be mugs if we didn't take that on, in the future. And I think it really is the way forwards, and it's not only more efficient and faster, it's actually smoother as well. So it's the ride is actually very much a magic carpet ride, and you only have to sort of look out the window of sailing one of the America's Cup class yachts and how smooth you're transitioning through the wave tops versus an old school powerboat out the window, bouncing up and down and getting smashed to pieces through the waves. It really is it's a win-win in all facets. So certainly for commercial ferries up to a certain size, like there is a crossover on the graph where it actually is not beneficial to foil because you're actually having to carry too much weight. But for certain size vessels, up to quite large ferries, it really does pay to lift the hulls up and out of the water. And that saving in fuel longer term, you think of how many ferries and boats there are worldwide and how much shipping there is worldwide. There's literally millions and millions of big boats on the water. So if you could just make a 10 or 20% difference to all those, it's an absolutely massive change going forward. So there'll be plenty of foiling boats around the Watermatta, I think, as we go forward tonight for sure.
And I was going to say, Glenn, when you said thrashing and ferries, I was just thinking about the Manly ferry and probably some memories I shouldn't be recalling. But mate, the one thing that interests me is you've been in the game of global sport as a competitor. For you right now today in sustainability, who's doing it well in sport?
That's a really, really good question. I think, firstly, on that, I think there's a lot of sports worldwide that, the whole, you talk about sort of the greenwashing of a lot of things. I think, to be honest, all sports, need to pull up their socks, to be fair. I don't think there's any one sport that's probably doing a better job off the top of my head than many others. I think certainly international sport, it's you need money, you need funds to hold events, and a lot of that is about how it fits in with big business. And that it really is, as I said before, sport in general need to pull up their socks and actually walk the walk and not just talk the talk. I think it's one thing to put a couple of recycling bins out the front of your event, but you got to do way more than that. It really is a massive one, and sport is a great foundation to actually really showcase and make a difference and actually do it properly. So I think in general, I think sport needs to make sure it holds its own and actually leads the way, because I think sport is something that globally, worldwide, everybody relates with and is into. So I think there's some work to be done for sure.
And on that profound note, Glenn Ashby, we'll leave you alone. Thanks for spending some time on Gold Diggers, winning in sports business, the pod. Really, really revealing and eye-opening. But if everything comes to play, mate, you might have your little bit, your part in changing the world.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate the chat, boys. Good luck with the rest of the show.
Thanks, mate.
Glenn.
Appreciate that time. Glenn Ashby, America's Cup winning. Notice I said good luck with the rest of the show. Yeah, they obviously has zero faith in us. No, but to take his point about greenwashing, I want to talk about this briefly, Mike, because it's something that I get a sense is happening a lot in business and in sports business, that a lot of companies are, and I have no anecdotal evidence, so I'm being a bit of a naughty boy here, but quite simply, we suddenly see a sustainability manager, sustainability director, sustainability this, sustainability that. But when I see it, I don't actually see any reason behind it when they talk about, we've appointed this person.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, mate. I mean, the reality is, and Glenn's raised it in that interview, this isn't about running moving from plastic cups to a reusable. It's actually being authentic. We talked about this in episode 1, collaboration, authenticity. Sustainability needs to be at the heart of everything that you do, and it needs to be owned by your staff, your team, and it needs to be sold. And, sport's empowering. People love their teams, and sport has a real strong role to play in sustainability.
All right, so you are the managing director of a company, and let's say you've got 500 staff. You want to be more sustainable. You have a premise, you have a large office premise. Are you going to employ a sustainability officer, or are you just going to say, right, we're going to recreate the narrative and we'll have a mission statement, and then we will put practices into place to make sure that we are a sustainable organisation?
Yeah, it's about buy-in. If you're going to start at it, before you even start defining what roles you're going to have, it's about why. What are you going to do? What do you do? What's your impact? And how do we actually play a very small part? And I think the critical thing is with people around climate and sustainability is everyone sort of thinks, well, I can't make a difference. And if you're a company, what do you do? What's your impact, your footprint? And how do we actually make change? And it's internal out versus a customer and your staff will see through a new title.
So the question is, as the managing director, are you going to put it into practice and say, this is our mission statement, or are you going to go, let's create a new position and hope they know what they're doing?
I'm going for the first option. We're not creating position, giving them one sustainability, and then in about 6 months' time, they're the head of sustainability, marketing, purpose, and general affairs.
I mean, the purpose thing. I love we talked about purpose last time out, right?
Yeah.
And there's a huge conference coming up in Paris, isn't there? Change Now conference?
Yeah, Change Now Paris. I think it is 21, 22 in Paris.
March 24, yeah.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing. I'm obviously very proud that Impact Sponsorship is one of the first adopters of the Climate Pledge. So from a sponsorship perspective, we actually commit to working with our partners to ensure that they have sustainable practices and that we're more efficient in how we deliver sponsorship. And this is about change.
Wow.
So Change Now will have about 400 speakers. I think there's 2,500 people that attend. There is a sport element, and if you're out there and you're listening, it's worth getting along to.
Crikey dicks! That's a big shift though, because what if you find out if you do your homework, and if you're a sponsorship individual doing your homework, not just trying to look at the buck and the bottom line, and that doesn't align with your practice and your beliefs, are you going to walk away from a potential deal?
Well,
is that what you're supposed to do?
Well, I'd say to you that if you are genuinely committed to the climate crisis and change, then yes. But I would suggest that, like Glenn emphasised, prohibitors, tech, finance, money for some reason makes us sing in different directions. But if you're truly committed to sustainability, you won't walk away. You will try and steer the boat forward, and if you can't, then you need to walk away.
I don't want us to sound like a couple of greenies, because we both believe in a green future, but not to the point of being totally, I'm going to walk around on my paper pants, if you know what I mean, right? And there's always compromise. There is always compromise, right? I'm not walking in the snow in my jandals, or flip flops or whatever, thongs or whatever you want to call them. Not thongs that you wear on your underneath your pants, right?
I had flashbacks of our two products now. We've got a Tay pen, and now we've got paper pants.
Paper pants, yeah, the green option. But I think it's really important for people to understand that if you make a commitment to going forward, the whole purpose is to look after the world we're in. It's not about look at me, make a statement, hey, how good is our company, yeah. It's about actually what we're doing here is the right thing for Mother Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, I'm lucky enough to be privileged to be a judge with the European Sponsorship Awards. I was able to see a number of sponsorships that are being driven by brand and by rights holders, by sport and arts. And there are some incredible initiatives going on in the world that are actually using technology and the future to change the way that we do things and to actually have a legacy and negative effect on the world.
All right, let me give you three examples of positive change in the marine sector. I know I probably should have talked about this after Glenn, but it all makes sense to me, right? So the America's Cup coming up in Barcelona right now. I have to say Barcelona because it's Catalan, right? It's not the... Yeah, we won't take that any further.
Part of the world.
Anyway, Agbar are a Spanish company. They're a sustainability company, waste, water management and environmental services. They're now the official sustainability partner for the America's Cup 37, right? There is a drought going on in Barcelona right now. So basically all the teams now have to look at the waste and water they're using, repotable, the whole 9 yards. And I think it's a magnificent, real-world example of going, yep, there's something going on, let's do something about it. The other part of it, of course, as Glenn talked about, the marine sector and big outboards, well, Yanmar are the official marine partner. Now, they're motors, boats, things like that, right? They have a challenge called the Yanmar Green Challenge 2050, where they're pushing green propulsion, hydrogen fuel cells, battery technology, hydrogen engine technology. And it's all going in the right direction. Third part, and this is another one, Ineos Britannia, the challenger of record, right? They're the ones say, we want to have a crack at Emirates Team New Zealand, right? They're basically pledging, by the start of the Challenger Series in August, around August 22, they'll be fully green. They've already put a mountain of solar panels on their hangar. And you're going, see, it's not about making a statement.
Correct.
It's about saying it can be done if you give a toss. By action. And so that's what that was about. So that was Gold Diggers, episode number 2, winning in sports business, sustainability in the sporting world. I think the key thing that I have learned today, Mike, from listening to both you and Glenn, don't do it because it looks good on your CV. Don't do it because it makes your company stand out in lights because, oh, look at me, I'm green. Do it because it's the right thing to do for Mother Earth. Are we on the same page there?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, don't forget, Gold Diggers, Winning in Sports Business, the podcast is available on Amazon, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Stephen with a PH, _McIvor5. What about you? Are you on socials?
No, I've blacked out.
You've blacked out. Just follow Mike Keech on LinkedIn. Just look in LinkedIn Rockstar Mike Keech and we are done. That is Gold Diggers episode number 2. Tell your friends about it and we'll see you next time.